Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, we'll be looking a little more closely into the membership bids of Sweden and Finland to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO for short. Last week, leaders of both countries presented their formal membership bids to the NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg. NATO members are behind this move, save one, Turkey, which says it has security concerns over Sweden hosting PKK members. The group is considered a terrorist organization in Turkey. In my conversation with the ambassador of Finland to Nigeria, Leena Pilvanayan, relations with Turkey are good. So are relations with Russia. A snag here, however, is that Russia is concerned about NATO's expansion in Eastern Europe and, more importantly, the establishment of military bases. We'll hear more from Ms. Pilvanayan in a few minutes. But first, a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has kicked off his Africa tour in Senegal, landing in Dakar, the capital, on Sunday. Russia's impact on energy and food prices and security will provide the backdrop to Mr. Scholz's first trip to Africa as German Chancellor. Senegal has billions of cubic meters of gas reserves and is expected to become a major gas producer in the region. Germany is seeking to reduce its heavy reliance on Russia for gas following the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. A statement by the government says Germany would explore a gas field in Senegal. He told a press conference on Sunday that Germany wants to intensively pursue gas and renewable energy projects with Senegal. Germany has invited both Senegal, which currently holds the rotating chairmanship of the African Union, and South Africa to attend the G7 summit it is hosting in June as guest countries. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the Ukrainian and Polish nations are united and cannot be divided as he welcomed his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda to Kiev. He called Duda a friend and brother and said there should be no borders or barriers between the two countries. President Duda later addressed the Ukrainian parliament, becoming the first foreign leader to do so in person since Russia invaded Ukraine. In his speech, he urged Ukraine not to give in to the demands of Russian President Vladimir Putin and that only Ukraine has the right to decide about its future, adding that surrendering any Ukrainian territory would be a blow to the entire West and repeated Poland's firm support for Ukraine's membership in the European Union. Back in April, President Duda visited Kiev for talks with the Ukrainian president as part of a delegation with the presidents of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the Indo-Pacific strategy hyped by the United States is doomed to fail while triggering global vigilance and concerns. Mr. Wang said this is due to revelation of its purpose of the strategy, featuring hegemony and stoking geopolitical confrontation. U.S. President Joe Biden has been on a tour of Indo-Pacific nations, starting in South Korea. The trip is seen as crucial for efforts to bolster regional cooperation and counter China. On Monday, he launches a plan for greater U.S. economic engagement with the Indo-Pacific. The program intends to bind regional countries more closely via common standards in areas including supply chain resilience, clean energy, infrastructure, and digital trade.
Welcome back. Fighting continues in Ukraine, especially in the Luhansk region. The UK's Ministry of Defense says Russia is believed to have deployed the only operational company of its BMP-T Terminator tank support vehicles in Severodonetsk, a city in the Luhansk region. According to the UK, the city remains one of Russia's top tactical priorities at the moment. And the use of Terminators suggests a Russian formation known as the Central Grouping of Forces is present there, a formation which suffered heavy losses around Kyiv earlier in the war. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine says the situation in eastern Donbass remains extremely difficult as the Russian advancement continues. He says each day Ukrainian forces manage to disrupt Russian plans would help bring about the desired day, which we're all waiting for and fighting for badly, the day of victory, he says. Correspondents on the ground say both the Russians and the Ukrainians are landing heavy blows with artillery, but that the Ukrainians are outgunned despite weapons donations from Western countries. Meanwhile, countries such as Sweden and Finland are breaking from tradition to declare formal intentions to join NATO. About 2 weeks ago, two non-military aligned countries in Europe decided they will apply for NATO membership, ending decades of neutrality and causing a dramatic evolution in European security and geopolitics sparked by the Russian invasion. Before then, Sweden and Finland had kept NATO at arm's length, even while keeping tabs on Russia's advancement into Ukraine. That move by Russia, however, sparked renewed security concern across the region, and the leaders of each country signaled their desire to join the bloc after more than 75 years of military non-alignment. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin said if Finland took the historic step to apply to join the NATO alliance, it will be for the security of its own citizens, and that the move would strengthen the whole global community.
If Finland makes this historical step, it is for the security of our own citizens. Joining NATO would strengthen the whole international community that stands for our common values.
Shortly after declaring its intentions came international support.
President of Finland, Sauli Niinistö, and Prime Minister of the...
On May 11th, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he had agreed new deals with both Sweden and Finland to bolster European security, pledging to support both countries' armed forces should they come under attack. The new declarations were described by Britain as a step change in defence and security cooperation.
It's worth emphasising that if Sweden were attacked and looked to us for help and support, then we would provide it. But it's up to Sweden to make the request and to spell out exactly what support is requested.
And the Prime Minister and I have agreed to face challenges in peace, crisis and conflict together. And if either country should suffer a disaster or an attack, the United Kingdom and Sweden will assist each other in a variety of ways.
Russia also responded, saying Finland's move to join NATO was definitely a threat to Russia, and that the expansion of the military bloc will not make Europe or the world more stable. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the steps taken, especially by Finland, were a cause for regret and a reason to impose a symmetric response. Russian President Vladimir Putin later told his Finnish counterpart Sauli Niinistö that ditching the neutrality and joining NATO would be a mistake that could damage relations between their countries. Then came Turkey, citing concerns about the prospective of Sweden and Finland joining NATO over the country's support of the PKK Kurdish militant group. President Tayyip Erdogan later said Sweden should not expect Turkey to approve its NATO bid without returning the terrorists, and Swedish and Finnish delegations should not come to Turkey to convince it to back their membership in the alliance. On Wednesday, May 18, Finland and Sweden formally applied to join the NATO alliance at the Allied headquarters. NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg described the move as historic. Backed by their countries' parliaments, NATO members have promised a swift process to membership for Sweden and Finland, but they will have to meet the criteria set out in the alliance's 1995 study on enlargement. The criteria include a functioning democratic political system based on a market economy, fair treatment of minority populations, a commitment to resolve conflicts peacefully, an ability and willingness to make a military contribution to NATO operations, and a commitment to democratic civil-military relations and institutions. Analysts think Sweden and Finland have already met these requirements. To initiate official accession talks, Sweden and Finland must be invited by NATO, and all NATO members have to vote unanimously in favour of the candidates, following which declarations of commitment are sent in which they agree to fulfill NATO obligations. NATO then prepares for the adaptation of its treaty by means of the accession protocols, which have to be ratified by all member countries. Finland and Sweden have formally applied to join the NATO alliance as protection against Russia. Formal applications came in last week, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg was on hand to receive them. But bear in mind the process of NATO membership could take as much as a year or as long as a year, although member countries are saying they would want to see that process sped up for Finland and Sweden. Joining me now is Lina Pilvenainen, the ambassador of Finland to Nigeria. Ambassador, thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Well, thank you for having me.
Why does Finland consider this to be the right time for a NATO membership bid?
Well, as you might imagine, the 24th of February, Russia's attack, unprovoked, illegal, on Ukraine, a sovereign and peaceful neighbor of Russia, that really was a watershed moment, not only for Finland, but for all of Europe. It brought about a fundamental change in our security environment, and the decision that we've now made to join NATO is really a direct response to that event, to those events. That is not to say that we hadn't seen very worrying signals from Russia already much earlier. As we know, Russia has been engaged in warfare in Ukraine already since 2014. But what really was noted with great concern in Finland were the statements and the demands from President Putin towards the end of last year, when Russia demanded that NATO cease all forms of expansion in all directions, be that east or be that north, thereby taking away the sovereign rights of countries such as Finland and Sweden, to decide on their own security arrangements. Finland, for many years already, has had as a key principle of its foreign and security policy the maintenance of our freedom of choice and freedom of action. And Russia really, by threatening to take away that choice, forced us right now to make this choice and to make it now. This is a choice, though, although it's a decision that is historic, it's actually also very logical, because Finland for many years has been a very close cooperation partner with NATO. We have been actively involved in many NATO operations. We are integrated in many NATO structures. And this, in a way, is a very logical step. We are joining our closest cooperation partners now as a fully fledged member, with all the rights and responsibilities that come with that. So it is historic, but in a way, not terribly surprising. It's also something, a decision that is grounded very much in the wishes of the people, as in it is a democratic process involving the president, the parliament. Parliament voted with an overwhelming majority of 188 out of 200 in favor for filing the application. But even more importantly, the population of Finland, after the 24th of February, very quickly came to the conclusion that this is the right step to take. And the application joining NATO now enjoys the support of an overwhelming majority of the people in Finland. So it was very much a people-driven decision that we made.
Well, Russia has lashed out. I'm sure you already know. One of its demands is that NATO does not provide military bases, does not establish military bases in either Sweden or in Finland. And the Russian government has already cut electricity supply to Finland and has also cut gas as well. You consider this Russia's way of also expressing its displeasure about this NATO membership bid?
Well, as far as cutting electricity and gas supplies, that again has more to do with the EU reaction and the economic sanctions, the very, very harsh and strong sanctions that we have imposed on Russia. And it is to do with the form of payment for electricity and gas. Russia insists on payments in rubles, and that is not something that is in accordance with the agreements that we have. That is not something we want to do, and therefore supplies of both of these have been cut. We have been prepared, are prepared for these changes, and are not overly worried, I could say at this point. We do have alternative sources, both for buying electricity and both for gas supplies. So I would say these are more to do with the sanctions. Finland and Sweden would not be the only ones dealing with these kinds of issues with Russia at the moment. Also, other EU member countries have faced similar situations. In terms of Russia obviously would not welcome permanent NATO bases in Finland or in Sweden once we have joined. That is quite clear. That would alter some of the security environment, alter the balance, they have said. For them, that is quite natural. It would affect, I suppose, their military planning, but whether to have NATO bases now or in the future in Finland, that remains wholly and completely a Finnish national, independent, sovereign decision. That is not something that Russia has any say in either now or in the future. It's for Finland to decide, it's for Sweden to decide, and it's for NATO to discuss.
I'm glad you answered that question, because that was going to be my next question. If Finland, as a sovereign nation, does have plans for military bases, and how much you intend to keep up with this neutrality. But you mentioned sanctions, EU sanctions, which is why the Russian government is cutting gas and electricity. Is Finland also imposing unilateral sanctions against Russia?
No, we are not. That is not our national policy in any situation. Our sanctions are the EU sanctions, the sanctions that the EU as a whole has decided upon. As I said, historic in their reach, really, and a very clear signal of EU wanting to well, in the energy sector, also to speed it's as in lessen its dependency, I would say, on Russian oil and gas, and this was something that we were aiming at already before the war in Ukraine. But here again, Russia, with its own actions, has actually speeded up this process very much, lessening our dependence on Russian oil and gas, but also speeding up our transition to greener energy. So in a way, very good thing. We don't have national sanctions, no, but of course, many of our companies, many of Finnish enterprises that had previously worked in Russia, they are taking their own decisions, and many of them have withdrawn from Russia based on their own political and commercial assessments of the situation. One thing that I might want to add is you referred to Finland's previous position as a neutral country. We would say militarily non-aligned. We do not consider ourselves neutral. Being a member of the EU is a very strong political commitment. It is also a security commitment, in the sense that the EU is also a security community. So ever since joining the EU in 1995, we have no longer used the term neutral. We have been militarily non-aligned, but politically not neutral.
Thank you for pointing that out. Militarily non-aligned. Perhaps standing in the way of a NATO membership is Turkey's position. Well, Turkey's grouse is with Sweden, but the punishment extends even to Finland. What is Finland's relations with Turkey like?
Well, Finland actually has had a very strong, very good, very warm bilateral relationship with Turkey for a very long time, historically, but also in modern times. Finland has been one of the strongest supporters of Turkey's EU membership bid. It was actually decided upon in Helsinki at an EU summit already at the end of the 1990s. We also have quite a lot of cooperation on multilateral fora, for instance, in peace mediation and other issues. So our bilateral relations are very good. And obviously now, with the concerns that Turkey has raised, there is very active diplomatic engagement ongoing. I think talks are taking place even today. We want to hear directly from Turkey what their concerns are and then address these one by one. Some of the concerns that have been raised they touch upon issues that Finland alone probably cannot solve, but I'm quite confident all of these questions and concerns are ones that can be resolved through a diplomatic process and negotiations.
We've been asking this question severally, how and when we think this war will end. Can you venture a guess, perhaps?
I do not dare to venture a guess. I think all of us would say the sooner the better. The killing, it has to end. And everything that we are doing as Finland, everything that the EU as the European Union is doing is aimed at precisely that end result, stopping the killing, stopping the war, assisting Ukraine also in furthering that aim.
What role Finland is playing in the area of diplomatic efforts at ending this war? President Volodymyr Zelensky said, more diplomatic efforts is needed, but there seems to be more conversation with the Ukrainian president than with the Russian president on ending the war and the diplomatic efforts that the whole world is waiting on.
Well, as I mentioned, all of the measures that the EU has taken are aimed at convincing Russia to end this war. But we are also active bilaterally. Our president has held several conversations with the Russian president, most recently about a week ago. So there are contacts taking place, obviously very closely with various Ukrainian parties and President Zelensky in direct contact also with our president. But we do have a channel of communication to Moscow as well.
Ambassador Lena Pilvenayan, thank you for speaking with me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much.
We've come to the end of the program this week. If you missed any part of it, you can always play back on youtube.com/channelsweb. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.